Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Google I/O. And thank you so much for being here. On this session of Ask Me Anything, we'll answer your questions, as many of them as we can, on how to build great games on Assistant. I'm Stephanie. I'm a partner technology manager at Google, and I work with developers to build actions on Google. And here with me today, we have Jairo and John.
Hi, I'm Jairo from Brazil, and I am also a partner technology manager that helps developers create amazing games for Assistant. I have a mobile game development background, and I was a startup founder prior to joining Google.
Hi, I'm John. I'm the product manager for games on Google Assistant. Prior to joining Google, I spent 10 years building games on emerging platforms. And I've been pretty excited to work with all of the developers on the Google Assistant platform to really push the new frontiers of voice gaming. I'm excited and looking forward to answering your questions about how to build great experiences on all of the Google Assistant devices.
Thank you so much, Jairo and John, and thank you for being here. So before we begin, if you are a registered participant to this session, please put your questions on the Q&A section. And if you see any questions that is similar to yours, please vote them up so that we can prioritize which questions you want us to answer the most. And without further ado, let's begin. So our first question over here is from Mike. So Mike asks, how will users find my game after I publish it?
I can take that one. To start, Google, if you think about the company's history, is really known for search and optimizing finding things. And so as with Google search, we have algorithms in the background that essentially try to surface games that are relevant both to the user as well as content that actually is high quality. And in particular, we're looking for games that actually have very high retention and engagement from users' perspective. And so our encouragement for game developers is to make sure that if you focus on creating really high quality content, that those will actually help motivate those metrics and make it discoverable in a lot of our surfaces. In particular, when we look at the history of Google Assistant, we started on audio surfaces, and it was actually pretty difficult to find an audio game. But when we start looking at visual surfaces, there's actually an opportunity for us to actually have a games tab and have visual ranking of experiences when you ask to play a game. And so these are actually pretty key. The platform has key abilities to actually be able to showcase some of the experiences that the developer ecosystem has built.
Yeah, and to add on to that, we actually have this setting called built-in intent in our Actions console. So if you have developed a game with Google Assistant, you can turn on or opt into the play game built-in intent that will allow Google Assistant to know that you are actually building a game. And so how it works is that whenever user asks, for example, hey Google, play a game, or hey Google, I want to play a game. And then we will show this list of curated games that John has mentioned before. So if you opt into this play game built-in intent, your game would be also qualified to be shown there. So please do check it out on how to turn that on our developers website. Thank you. So our next question, we have a question here from Glenn. How long does it take to build a new Canvas game from scratch?
I can take this one. So it greatly depends on the complexity of the game and whether or not it uses the interactive canvas feature. So we have seen times of development for a simple conversational only game ranging between 1 or 3 months. And if it's an interactive canvas game with graphics and with touch interaction, it can take anywhere between 3 to 9 months, or even to a year if it's very complex and you want to make sure that it's clear of bugs and you have all the Q&A done. So those are the times that we have seen developers create games.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to take note, if you are new to the platform, Interactive Canvas is actually a framework that we have in Google Assistant that will also allow you to add the visual elements to your conversational action. So you can now create either a pure voice-based games or a game with a web app visual element as well using the Interactive Canvas. So please do check it out. Thank you. And the next question is from Mai Yang. And the question is, can we play Google Assistant games on PC? Sure.
Go ahead,
John.
Sure, sounds good. Currently, no, actually. I think as with all things for Google Assistant, we're constantly figuring out what are the right surfaces. Assistant is the vision of the Assistant product is to help users get things done. And so we want to be on every surface that we possibly can. As it currently stands, we don't really have Assistant support on PCs, but stay tuned. I think there always is a possibility for us to expand it to other platforms. And if Assistant becomes available on the platform, you can be sure that we're going to be looking to get third-party game developers access.
Yeah, that being said, so Google Assistant is currently available in all the devices in which Google Assistant runs. For example, you'll have your smart speaker like Google Nest. We have also the Google Nest Hub, which is the smart display, and also your mobile phones. And just one caveat, if you're creating an interactive canvas-based game, at the moment, it only works on Android mobile phones and not on iOS yet. But yeah, so please do take note on that. And thank you for your question. So the next question is from Preeti. So the question is, what type of users are playing games on Assistant? So I can take a step on that. So actually, I would think it really depends on your use case. So if you have a use case, for example, like we've seen on the platform, word games, that is very emerging in this platform. And also because of the nature of it being very voice forward, because you need to answer it with words or with voice, then it can be as large as a game with general audience. So it can be played by anybody and almost anytime. Like if you have it on your mobile, you can also play it on your mobile. And but if, let's say, you have something like, for example, virtual pet games like My Smart Pet, then in that case, it might be a more family type games, or the games that is more suitable for smart display, where your devices is on a common space and people can actually interact with it anytime. So it might be a game that is more targeted towards family or towards general audiences, as well as you might also have it on your mobile devices.
Yeah, I'll add to that just a little bit. I think if you think about the location of the specific Google Assistant device, you'll see a slightly different audience for each of those form factors. And so on mobile phones, you do have typical users of the mobile phone, very broad demographic. If you look at smart displays, though, these are often placed in common areas. And so the type of experiences that and the type of audiences that play them might actually be more family oriented when people are gathering together and engaging on things. And so as Stephani alluded to, virtual pets and casual word games certainly is what we've seen to be somewhat successful on the platform to date.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your question. And so the next question that we have is from Jeff. What are the biggest technical challenges that developers face when building a game for Google Assistant?
Oh, good question. I can take this one. When you create a game for the Google Assistant platform, you have two main challenges. The first one is making sure that you design for a voice-forward game, making sure that that is the core of the game, and you don't just port the game from another platform to the Assistant platform. we have plenty of resources in our documentations to help you to do that. And the other big technical challenge that we have seen with developers new to the platform is that the whole architecture is a server client architecture, so it's not as straightforward as making, for example, a mobile game or a web game that only works and operates in a single code base. So you need to have the client code base and functionality, and you also need to have the server code and functionality, and they communicate via webhooks. So that, I would say, are the biggest technical challenge we have seen.
Yeah, thank you, Jairo. And I think one more thing that I would like to add to that is that games on Google Assistant are voice forward. So sometimes it really takes a little bit of time for us to design a game that is a little bit different from what we usually typically see, like, for example, mobile games or console games that has more physical input rather than voice. So in that case, please do keep that in mind, as well as good use cases that is designed from the beginning would actually help the success of the games itself. Thank you so much for your question. So the next question that we have is from Matthias. And the question is, I've created an assistant game with the Canvas API, but my concern is latency. For example, it takes a bit long to recognize user voice and move to the next scene. Do you have any plan to improve latency, or are there tips to improve latency?
Mm-hmm. I can also take this one, or start taking this one. So any plans to improve latency? So in this Google I/O, we are announcing in the assistant keynote some improvements to reduce the perceived latency for your games. But apart from those, we also have some tips for when you design and when you build your game. For example, you can hide the latency or make it less apparent with some tricks. For example, you can, instead of making the game stop and start loading, you can make, for example, that your command is given to a character and the character starts thinking or starts like thinking about how to answer you. So it makes it more natural.
Yeah, I'll jump in here as well. Like I think if you look at the nature of a voice forward game, it's never really designed as an input to an action game or something that really requires millisecond response time. And so while as a platform, we're always working on improving the latency, there are a lot of components to what a user perceives as latency in terms of the responsiveness. So for example, when we actually end and close the microphone and send that to the server to query, we can improve the actual technical latency to a low number of milliseconds. And actually we're constantly improving that. But when we decide that the user has actually stopped talking is something that actually is a user perception, is something that actually has to be tuned depending on the use case. And so we're never from a technical perspective going to get to that type of rapid response that you would expect. And so I think what Jairo described is reframing it in a perspective where, you can have an immersive game where voice is the right input. And by doing so and taking advantage of what voice actually brings to your game, rather than thinking about bringing, a high response time action game, is important to consider in terms of like the genre of game that you want to build. I'll also take a quick moment to highlight exactly the beginning of what I said, which is that, on that same front, though, we are looking for ways to continue to improve the experience on the platform. And the new interactive canvas APIs that were discussed in the keynote really there are two benefits. I think on the developer side, if you are a web game developer and you already sort of have a client-centric development model, the tools will go a long way to helping bridge that gap. And it will be coming to developer preview soon. The other side of it is that being client-centric, the actual perceived latency from the user actually goes down, tremendously. And so by nature of both technical improvements as well as sort of design considerations, I think we can create a new genre of games that really focus on using the voice.
Thank you so much for your answers. And so on to the next question. we have a question from Nick. What is the best way to monetize my game? I can start with that. So I think monetization is something that is always in the minds of a lot of developers as well as in our minds. So one of the suggestions that we would have is that you can make use of the digital transaction API that we already have in our platform. So basically what it does is that it allows you to have this subscription base or build in-app purchases on your games on Assistant. And in that way, you can actually monetize your game. And you can also check them out on our developers website. And one caveat though is that digital transaction is currently available to a set of countries. So it's not live everywhere in the whole world. So please do check it out as well on the targeted countries that you have, that digital transaction API is live. All right. Thank you so much for your question. So the next question is from Kirtiman. Hi, how to handle multiple inputs simultaneously while working with interactive canvas, especially in a game setup which require frequent inputs from players in local multiplayer mode, example, bingo?
That's a really good question. Actually, I'll take this one if you guys don't object. I think it calls out by nature some of the difficulties of a conversational game. So as a framework, a conversational action really requires you to be turn-based. So if I say something, then the actual conversation respond. I would not actually have multiple inputs if I were to talk to you. However, obviously for games, that's not always the case. I may be actually tapping on some menus and trying to select something at the same time. I'm multitasking and trying to accomplish whether it's a conversation or something else on the side. That's actually where the beauty of interactive canvas comes in, particularly with some of the more recent APIs that we announced, and we're really excited to get them into the developer preview coming soon. Our focal point will be actually to shift a lot of the core game logic to the client side. And so as an experienced H5 game developer, or someone who aspires to be, and you don't have to have the expertise right now, you can actually allow for these types of multiple simultaneous inputs in the client side. And what you need to do is after all of that logic gets resolved, you can then send a conversational component back to the actions on Google platform in order to advance to whatever a conversational state. At the same time, you can still use a conversational platform at any point in time to actually leverage the value and the benefit of our NLU and our speech recognition, and get back into that linear sequence rather than in the multiple simultaneous input mode.
Mm-hmm. I can add to what John just said. Specifically, I want to address the multiplayer mode part of the question. So we have seen an interesting pattern in some successful games in the Assistant platform, which implies like assigning a keyword to each player. So let's say that keywords are, for example, colors. So one player can be one color, let's say red, and the other can be blue. And before saying its answer, each player says the color before. For example, like red 1, and that means that answer is from my player. This is a solution, but of course I would totally consider what John said of taking into account what is the nature of the platform.
Thank you so much both for your answers, and thank you for the question. So the next question that we have is from Takaki. What's the advantage of building a game for Assistant compared to a native mobile app?
I can take this one. I think foundationally, building a game for Assistant would, while not necessary, I think the innovation that we're hoping to see foster in this ecosystem is centered around voice. And while there are speech recognition APIs available for mobile, I think our technology, I know I work here and everything, but I think it's world-class. I think it is really the best technology that you can get access to in terms of language understanding, as well as speech recognition. And so the space is still, pretty nascent. I think we're still exploring and understanding just the depths of what we can do with language. But I think if you were to focus on assistant-based gaming, I think it would behoove any developer to take advantage of the core competencies of what the assistant platform is going to bring. Now, at the same time, we are trying to, bring classic game development capabilities to the device, and that's why we use the existing HTML5 stack for web development, and trying to make sure that we adapt it to more of a client development model. But our encouragement here is that as we continue to explore the space together, I want to make sure that everyone understands like the benefits of using the voice and experiment and try to find new, novel, creative gameplay.
Yeah, and if you are also trying to figure out how is the best way to create voice games, or what is the best way to design a voice game, please do check also our developer documents. That is developers.google.com/assistant. So we have a lot of information there, including all the APIs that we have mentioned, as well as design guidelines that you can also follow. So please do check that out as well. All right, so thank you for your question. Let's go to the next question. It's from Abhishek. I don't have any coding experience, but interested in this. Where should I start with?
I can take this one, Abhishek. So my first recommendation would be experiment with the action builder or new IDE that makes it very easy for you to create conversational actions. And if you want to make interactive canvas games, we have very interactive, let's say, tutorials or code labs, which you can check in our documentations, which will guide you step by step on how to start making games more fun, more interactive with the Canvas API for the Google Assistant.
Yeah, so we have a lot of code labs as well as GitHub examples on our developer website. So you can just download them and simply upload them to the Actions console, and you'll have a game running, and you can try to play around the tool to see how it works. That being said, our Actions console is also very beginner friendly, so you can try it out and see that there are step-by-step guidelines on how to use it, and you don't need prior knowledge on coding to use this. So hope that encourages you to try it out, and thank you for the question. So the next question is from Kirtiman. What are the optimal retention rate benchmarks for games on Google Assistant?
I can take that one. It's a really good question. I think, naturally, games on Assistant are by nature very different than on a mobile device. And back in my mobile days, 40-20-10 was the golden rule of what we want for 1-day retention, 7-day retention, 30-day retention. I can't be too transparent with some of the metrics, particularly of games that we're seeing right now. I will say that, if intuitively you probably expect them to be a little bit lower than what you're expecting, what you're seeing on mobile. And I think that's by nature of the fact that the device surfaces are actually very different. The visual re-engagement and some of the product features to bring users back into the game are not necessarily available on the platform. And lastly, I think the actual content that's being built on the platform, I think, is still continuing to evolve, and we're only scratching the surface of what is relevant to users in the particular device settings. All that said, though, I think we've actually launched a lot of features to actually help with the retention of games with the Game Center and the visual components associated with how users can discover games in terms of what they've played recently, in terms of personalization in how they search for games. All of these features are ways that we can actually continue to improve the retention and engagement in games. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for the question. So the next question that we have is from Ming. What is the best way to port our mobile game to assistant platform?
All right, I can take this one. So when you port a mobile game to the assistant platform, there are two parts of this issue. The first one is the design part. First, you need to make sure that the game you want to port is compatible with the assistant paradigm, the conversational and voice forward interaction model. If not, I recommend you to select a part of the game which may be compatible with this new paradigm, or just design a new level, a new phase, or a new game mode which makes use of this paradigm. The second part would be the technical or the actual porting of the code or the assets. If you're using a game engine that already can compile to HTML5 and JavaScript, you can use that feature, you can use that compilation, and that code can be a base for you to start making this migration. And if not, you can take your assets and use a JavaScript framework like Pixie and others that will help you create your game faster in the assistant.
I think that sums it up very well. Thank you. And we are almost at time, so we have a few more minutes to answer the last probably couple of questions. So please put your question up or vote them up if you haven't done so. So the next question that we have is from David. What types of games are users playing on Google Assistant?
I can open here, though I think you guys all have your own favorite games that you're playing on the assistant as well. So I'll certainly lead with mine. The category of games, as we sort of alluded to, really all center around like casual experiences, and particularly on our smart display devices, they're often family friendly and appeal to a broad audience that may not actually spend an hour at a time, although occasionally we see that happen. But they're all sort of like bite-sized experiences that users can go over, and so my personal favorite actually is a crossword game. So I like crosswords in general, but oftentimes when I'm actually standing around cooking, I can't have my mobile phone open while I'm trying to stir fry something. And so having the Google Assistant open and able to provide me a crossword where I glance over, think about the questions, and then be able to respond actually is something that I felt was a very compelling use case for a journey that I did every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about personal favorite, mine would be virtual pets. I love cute characters. So I would recommend to try out also maybe my smart pet. So what I love is that you can actually talk to the pets. So it's not just something that it feels like one-way communication. So it feels like you can really talk to them. And I think it really leverages on the technology that Google Assistant has. So you want to share yours?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, apart from word games and smart pets, another very popular category of assistant games is trivia. This is something that is very compatible with the paradigm that assistant offers. But if I had to name my favorite one, it would be Guess the Drawing. I think it also makes good use of the voice forward paradigm. Yes.
Cool. And maybe I'll take a moment just to add here. Like, I don't think that the games that are on Assistant is a comprehensive set of what's possible with voice and with these particular devices. And so while I think they are, indicative of maybe where the current user base is experiencing games, I think there's a lot of opportunity for creative game developers to actually build and help us explore what's next. I think we're always innovating in terms of how we want to provide a platform that can actually deliver genuine innovative experiences. But the ecosystem is where these actual innovation and creative experiences are going to come from. And so our hope is here to showcase some things that have worked to date. And I think there's a tremendous amount of momentum on the platform, but really rely on developers just like you to be able to help engage, think creatively, and figure out how voice can transform how people play games.
Thank you so much, Jairo and John. And I think we are at time. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you also for your questions. We hope that all that we have discussed about help you to understand the platform, as well as to build your next game on Assistant. And if you have any further questions or suggestions, please reach out to us on our developer website. That is developers.google.com/assistant under the support section. You can reach us out through Reddit or Stack Overflow. And that being said, we can't wait to see what you build. Thank you.